The air buzzed with excitement at Silverstone Estates, a hidden pocket of luxury tucked away behind towering iron gates and lush, manicured gardens. It was the day everyone had circled on their calendars for months, the annual Silverstone Community Gala. This was no ordinary neighborhood gathering. No paper plates, no backyard barbecues. No, here, the richest of the rich came out in full force. Men in sharp tailored suits, women in gowns that shimmered under the chandelier lights, and children decked out like miniature royalty. Every inch of Silverstone glowed with wealth and power. The private roads leading to the grand event center were lined with cars that cost more than most people's homes, sleek black Bentleys, pearl-white Rolls-Royces, blood-red Ferraris, all polished to a mirror shine. On the grand lawn, white tents fluttered in the breeze, their interiors packed with golden candelabras, silk tablecloths, and imported crystal glasses filled with champagne. Nothing was left to chance. Nothing was meant to be ordinary. And then he showed up. The first thing people noticed wasn't his face. It was his boots, old, scuffed, and coated in dust. Then his jeans, faded and creased, the kind you'd expect on a man who spent more time with cattle than computers. And finally, that cowboy hat, slanted low over his forehead, shadowing eyes that seemed far too calm for a place dripping with tension. He looked like he had just wandered off a ranch, lost, clueless, and completely out of place. Every conversation froze mid-sentence. Forks hung midair. Crystal glasses trembled in hands. Heads swiveled. Silence fell like a hammer. Then came the murmurs. Who is he? Is he a worker? Maybe he's here to clean up after the event. Did someone seriously let a homeless man in? The tension in the air turned sharp, buzzing like an electric wire about to snap. Among the stunned onlookers stood Marissa Davenport, the self-proclaimed Queen of Silverstone. At just 28 years old, Marissa had perfected the art of social warfare. Her family had old money, and she wielded it like a sword. Her designer gown, a custom red Valentino piece flown in from Milan, clung to her like it had been stitched onto her body. Her blonde curls bounced with every move she made. A heavy diamond bracelet glittered around her wrist, catching every light and reflecting it like 1,000 tiny suns. To her, Silverstone wasn't just home. It was her kingdom. And today, she would make sure everyone knew it. When she spotted the cowboy standing awkwardly near the entrance, her lips curled into a smirk so sharp it could slice stone. Perfect. A chance to show everyone who belonged here and who didn't. She strutted forward, the sound of her crimson heels snapping against the marble walkway. Each step was deliberate, loud enough to draw more attention, to gather more eyes. She wanted a crowd. She needed a crowd. And she got one. Stopping just a few feet from the drifter, she planted one manicured hand on her hip and tilted her head in exaggerated pity. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "This is a private event. Guests only. Not," she paused for effect, "drifters." A few snickers rose from the crowd. The cowboy said nothing. He simply stood there, one thumb casually hooked into the belt loop of his jeans, watching her with a kind of detached curiosity, like she was a bug buzzing in front of his face. The lack of reaction only fueled Marissa's fire. She waved a perfectly manicured hand toward the security station nearby. "Security," she barked, snapping her fingers like she was calling for a butler. The security guard, a burly man named Mike, hustled over, adjusting his radio as he jogged up. His brow furrowed when he spotted the cowboy, but he hesitated for half a second. Something about the cowboy's presence made him uneasy. Marissa didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't care. She turned dramatically to the gathering crowd, now a small sea of expensive dresses and tailored suits, and announced loudly. "We have standards here, people. We can't have every cowboy wandering off the street into our homes. Not today. Not ever." More laughter followed. Even a few slow claps. Still, the cowboy didn't budge. He didn't blink. He didn't even tip his hat. Mike cleared his throat awkwardly, stepping closer. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises," Mike said, his voice unsure. For the first time, the cowboy moved. Slowly, almost lazily, he pushed the brim of his hat back just enough for his eyes to catch the light. They were sharp, piercing, a color somewhere between steel blue and stormy gray. Eyes that had seen things. Eyes that didn't scare easy. And suddenly, Mike, and a few others, got a weird, sinking feeling in their guts. But Marissa? She didn't notice anything except her own smug reflection in the glass doors nearby. "Take him back to whatever barn he crawled out from," she snapped at Mike, her voice gleeful. The cowboy gave a small, almost amused smile. The kind of smile a king gives when a court jester forgets his place. He still didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Because the truth was about to hit Silverstone like a freight train, and Marissa would be standing right on the tracks. What no one in that glittering, laughing crowd realized was this. The drifter they were mocking owned every single brick, blade of grass, and fence post in Silverstone Estates. And he had come here, not to party, not to mingle, but to make a move so powerful, it would change everything. The gala, the laughter, the luxury. They were all standing on land that belonged to him. And tonight? He planned to remind them. The laughter still echoed as Mike hesitated, glancing nervously at the cowboy. It wasn't just the stranger's calmness that bothered him. It was something else, an invisible weight in the air, like the ground was about to crack open beneath their feet. The cowboy gave Mike a small nod, as if to say, "Go ahead. Do your job." But there was something in his eyes that made Mike freeze mid-step. Marissa, however, was too drunk on attention to notice the tension thickening around them. She turned back to the crowd, tossing her golden curls over her shoulder, loving the gasps and giggles still buzzing. "You see, darlings," she said loudly, throwing her arms out dramatically. "Not everyone deserves to stand where we stand. Not everyone can breathe our air." The crowd chuckled and applauded, eating up every word. But tucked in the back, a few older men who had lived long enough to recognize real power when it entered a room, started to shift uncomfortably. They knew something wasn't right. Meanwhile, the cowboy took one slow step forward. Not threatening. Not aggressive. Just deliberate. He reached into the inner pocket of his leather jacket. For a split second, everyone stiffened, some clutching their pearls, some pulling their children closer. Was he pulling out a weapon? A protest? An invitation? Instead, the cowboy pulled out a folded envelope. Thick. Official-looking. Embossed with gold lettering. Mike furrowed his brow deeper. He took it cautiously, turning it over in his hands. His eyes widened the moment he saw the stamp. Silverstone Estates Incorporated. Property owner's authorization, full rights and title. Mike's head shot up, his mouth falling slightly open. "Yes, sir, this says you," he stammered. Before he could finish, a deep voice sliced through the awkward silence. "That's enough, Mike," boomed a man in a crisp navy suit, pushing his way through the crowd. It was Gregory Miles, the president of the Silverstone Homeowners Association, a man who everyone feared, until today. Gregory snatched the envelope from Mike's hands, scanned it quickly, and his face drained of all color. "This can't be real," Gregory whispered, his hands starting to shake. "This has to be a mistake." The cowboy finally spoke. His voice was low and steady, like distant thunder rolling over empty plains. "No mistake," he said simply. "Name's Colton West. Owner of Silverstone Estates. Bought it 6 months ago." The crowd gasped. Even Marissa, for the first time that night, looked unsure. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish trying to find water. "Liar," she finally hissed, her cheeks flaming red. You're lying. Colton West didn't even blink. He turned to Gregory, who was sweating bullets now, clutching the envelope like it might burst into flames. Go ahead, Greg, Colton said, the faintest smirk playing on his lips. Tell them who signed the sale papers. Gregory swallowed hard, adjusting his tie. It's true, he said hoarsely. Mr. West owns everything. The roads. The gates. Even the land your houses sit on. The world seemed to tilt sideways. The crowd that had once sneered and laughed now stood silent, stunned, shrinking into themselves. They weren't standing on their own land. They were standing on his. Marissa stumbled backward, her face pale now. She looked around for someone, anyone, to save her. No one moved. Colton turned his sharp gaze back to her, calm and unbothered. Funny, he said quietly. You called me a drifter. But I'm the one holding the keys to your world. It should have ended there. But Colton West wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. He pulled another envelope from his jacket, this one thinner but just as official. Mike, still pale-faced, took it from him and read the top line aloud. Notice of policy changes and community requirements. Effective immediately. Colton tipped his hat back, fully revealing his rugged, sun-kissed face, a face worn by hard work, not easy money. His gray-blue eyes swept over the stunned crowd, landing squarely on Marissa. New rules, folks, he said calmly. Starting tonight, things around here are gonna change. The first rule was simple. No more discrimination based on appearance. No more class warfare. And Marissa? Well, her world was about to get a whole lot smaller. But before Colton could announce the full list of new rules, a screech of tires echoed through the estate. A black SUV slammed to a stop just beyond the fountain. Out jumped a man in a black suit and sunglasses, yelling something urgent. Colton's face tightened, his cowboy coolness flickering for just a second. The crowd's head whipped toward the commotion, murmuring growing louder. Something bigger was coming. Something that would shake Silverstone even harder than tonight's revelation. The black SUV's door slammed shut behind the suited man as he rushed across the courtyard, his dress shoes crunching against the gravel. Mr. West, he called urgently, weaving between stunned guests. It's urgent, about the McAllister land deal. Colton's jaw clenched. The name alone hit him like a sucker punch to the gut. McAllister. A name he hadn't heard in years. A name that dragged memories he had buried deep, clawing back into the light. The guests murmured, confused and curious, while Marissa, still fuming and humiliated, folded her arms tightly across her chest. She wasn't done with him. Not yet. Colton held up a hand to the suited man. Later, Jackson. This here, he gestured around at the snobby, frozen crowd, needs finishing first. The man nodded stiffly but kept glancing nervously back at the SUV, shifting from foot to foot. Turning back to the crowd, Colton squared his shoulders and took a slow, measured breath. For a moment, a heavy silence stretched across the estate. The air was thick, like it was holding its breath right along with everyone else. Finally, Colton spoke. I know most of you don't recognize me. And I don't blame you. It's been 15 years since I last set foot on this land. Whispers rippled through the crowd. 15 years. He had lived here before. Marissa sneered. Let me guess, she said loudly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You mucked out horse stalls or mowed lawns. That's why you're so sentimental about it. A few weak chuckles sputtered from the crowd, but they quickly died when Colton's eyes, hard as flint, landed on her. No, ma'am, he said quietly. I grew up here. Right over that hill, on the old Willow Creek Ranch. A stunned silence fell. The Willow Creek Ranch was legendary. It had once been the heart of this land, a sprawling, beautiful property where wild horses ran free, and cattle grazed under endless blue skies. It was gone now. Bulldozed. Buried under tennis courts and luxury townhomes. You see, Colton continued, his voice thickening. My family owned all of Silverstone before there was a single mansion here. Before the golf course. Before the fountains. This was ours. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Until it was stolen. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Stolen? Marissa scoffed. You expect us to believe you were some big land baron and just lost it? Please. Colton's gaze didn't waver. When my father died, he trusted some men from town to help us keep the land afloat. Instead, they tricked my mother into signing everything away, piece by piece. Hidden contracts. Dirty deals. A handshake here, a threat there. He looked past them, staring at the marble pillars, the manicured hedges, the glimmering fountains, all built on the bones of his family's dreams. They chewed us up and spat us out. My mother died heartbroken. And I left, with nothing but the clothes on my back and a promise I made standing over her grave. He turned slowly, scanning the stunned faces. I swore I'd come back one day. Not as a servant. Not as a beggar. But as the man who would take back everything they stole. His voice was calm, but beneath the surface, it vibrated with deep, bone-deep pain. Marissa's face twisted into a mask of disbelief and rage. You're lying, she snapped, stepping forward. You're just trying to play some sob story to make us feel sorry for you. Well, it's not working. You're still just a... Enough. The voice wasn't Colton's. It was Gregory Miles, the HOA president, his face flushed and trembling. I remember, Gregory said hoarsely, cutting through the thick air. I was a junior clerk back then. I saw the papers. Willow Creek. He looked at Colton, shame twisting his face. He's telling the truth. The ground seemed to shift under their feet. The crowd recoiled, exchanging panicked looks. Whispers turned to frantic murmurs. People clutched their partners' arms, wondering if their homes, their status, even their futures were in danger. Colton tipped his hat lower. Don't worry, he said, a faint, ironic smile playing at his lips. I'm not here to kick you all out, yet. But there are gonna be some new rules. Some changes. He tucked the original envelope back into his jacket and nodded toward the luxury tents in the distance where champagne still flowed and music still played for a party that had no idea it was over. Tonight, y'all threw a party on land built on broken promises. Tomorrow, we start building something better. And everyone who treated me like dirt today. His eyes locked on Marissa. You're gonna learn real quick, you reap what you sow. Before Marissa could lash out again, Jackson jogged up, panting. Boss, it's urgent. They're trying to block the McAllister deal. Colton's expression darkened instantly. He nodded once. Handle it, he said to Jackson. And get the jet ready. The words made the crowd collectively stiffen again. Jet? This cowboy, this drifter, had a private jet. Marissa's face twisted even deeper in disbelief and horror. As Colton turned to walk away, the guests instinctively parted like a sea before him. No one dared say a word. No one dared even breathe too loudly. But Colton wasn't done yet. There was still one secret left, one bombshell that would change everything they thought they knew about Silverstone. Because he wasn't just planning to change the estate. He was planning to destroy everything that stood on it. The party at Silverstone Estates was dead now. The champagne glasses sat untouched. The violin music trailed off into awkward silence. And the people, the proud, wealthy people, who had once looked down their noses at Colton West now huddled together in small, terrified groups, whispering urgently. They understood now. They were living on borrowed land. And their landlord had come to collect. Colton walked with calm, deliberate steps toward the grand fountain at the center of the courtyard, his boots echoing sharply on the stone. He stopped, turning slowly to face the trembling crowd, his shadow falling long and dark across the marble ground. Jackson, still holding a thick folder in his hand, caught up to him and handed it over. Colton took it without looking, his eyes scanning the faces before him, faces that now looked so small, so lost, so far from the smug royalty they had been minutes ago. "Time you all learned the full story," he said quietly. "Because this land wasn't the only thing stolen all those years ago." The folder in his hand was thick, stuffed with deeds, contracts, photos, proof. Proof of betrayal. Proof of lies. He flipped it open casually and pulled out a photograph. It was old, faded at the edges. A family stood together in front of a weathered wooden ranch house, a man with broad shoulders, a smiling woman holding a baby, and a young boy clutching a cowboy hat too big for his head. Colton tapped the picture. "This was my family," he said. "Before the deals. Before the lies. Before Silverstone." The photo made its way around the crowd. Some recognized the landscape behind the family, the hill where now stood the grand clubhouse. The creek that was now buried under the parking lot. And then, without warning, Colton pulled out another document, this one newer, more shocking. "This," he said, holding it high, "is a DNA report." Confused murmurs rippled through the guests. "Turns out," Colton continued, his voice calm but cutting, "when they stole our land, they stole something else too." He locked eyes with Marissa, who instinctively took a step back, her stomach twisting into knots. "You see, Marissa," Colton said, almost gently. "Your grandfather wasn't just one of the men who tricked my mother. He was my father's brother." The word struck like lightning. What?" Marissa gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "Your family didn't just steal from us," Colton said, stepping closer. "They stole from their own blood." The color drained completely from Marissa's face. The crowd erupted into a storm of whispers, gasps, and shocked cries. "No, no, that's not true." Marissa shrieked, clutching her head like she could rip the truth out of her own brain. "You're lying. You're making this up." Colton didn't flinch. He tossed another paper onto the nearest table, a certified copy of a last will and testament, dated nearly 30 years ago. "Your grandfather knew. He wrote it down. He promised my family a share of the estate if anything ever happened. But instead, they buried it. Hid it. Built this empire on a foundation of betrayal." For the first time in her entire life, Marissa, Silverstone's untouchable princess, had no words. She stumbled back, nearly tripping over her own heels. The other guests, sensing the shift, began to turn on her. "She knew," someone hissed. "Her family covered it up. We trusted her to lead us, and all this time, she was sitting on a lie." Marissa spun around, desperately searching for an escape, but the once adoring crowd had formed an invisible wall around her. Colton watched quietly, his face a blank mask. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. He lifted his voice once more, commanding the entire estate's attention. "Starting today, Silverstone Estates will change. No more secret deals. No more social royalty. The community will be open. Fair. And those who can't live with that," he let the words hang heavy in the air, "are welcome to leave." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Leave? Lose everything they had built their lives on? Colton tucked the folder under his arm and turned, heading back toward the black SUV. Jackson opened the door for him, but before climbing in, Colton paused and looked over his shoulder one last time. His eyes found Marissa, who had sunk onto the edge of a marble bench, her hands trembling, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. "Funny thing about crowns," he said, his voice soft but sharp. They're easy to wear, until someone reminds you they're made of paper. With that, Colton climbed into the SUV, and the door slammed shut behind him. The engine roared to life. The king was leaving. And Silverstone would never, ever be the same. But little did Colton know. One more secret still lurked in Silverstone, one that would change his own life forever. The black SUV rumbled down the winding private road of Silverstone Estates, leaving the stunned, broken crowd behind. Inside, Colton West sat quietly, staring out the tinted window, the folder still resting on his lap. It should have felt like victory. It should have felt like the end of a long, brutal road. But deep down, Colton knew, something was still missing. A weight still pressed on his chest, a gnawing feeling in his gut. "Boss?" Jackson said from the front seat, glancing nervously at him through the rearview mirror. "You okay?" Colton didn't answer right away. He watched the rolling hills outside, hills that had once been green pastures full of horses and sunflowers and the smell of fresh rain. Now they were lined with cold concrete and sharp iron gates. "Just tired," Colton finally said, his voice rough. Jackson nodded, but the tension in the car didn't ease. Minutes later, they pulled into a quiet side road, the only piece of the estate that hadn't been paved or touched by new money. There, hidden behind a crumbling stone wall and a grove of ancient oak trees, stood the old Willow Creek Cemetery. Colton stepped out of the SUV. The evening air was cool, the sky bleeding into deep shades of purple and gold. The smell of wildflowers and earth filled his nose, a smell he hadn't realized he missed until now. He made his way slowly to a crooked headstone near the back, the letters worn smooth by years of rain and wind. Martha West. Beloved mother. Keeper of dreams. Colton knelt down, brushing his fingers gently over the stone. "I did it, Mama," he whispered. "I came back. I kept my promise." For a long moment, he just knelt there, the only sounds the whisper of the wind and the distant call of a mourning dove. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something. An old iron box, half buried in the soil behind the headstone. The edge of it was sticking out, as if the ground had shifted just enough to reveal its hiding place. Frowning, Colton dug carefully with his hands until he pulled it free. The box was rusted shut, but Jackson rushed over with a crowbar, and together they pried it open. Inside, wrapped in brittle oilcloth, was a bundle of letters. Dozens of them. All addressed in the same delicate handwriting. "To Colton West, when you're ready." Colton's hands shook slightly as he lifted one of the letters free and unfolded it. His mother's handwriting flowed across the page, trembling but strong. "My sweet boy. If you are reading this, it means you found your way home. It means you didn't let anger or bitterness swallow you. I'm so proud of you, wherever you are. But you need to know the full truth before you rebuild. There's something I never told you, something I was too scared to say when you were young. You are not just my son. You are also the rightful heir to the McAllister fortune. I never wanted you burdened by the wars and blood feuds that tore our families apart. But it's time you knew, your father was not just a West. He was a McAllister, too. You have the blood of both houses in your veins. The land is yours. The legacy is yours. Forgive us for keeping it hidden. Build something beautiful, my boy. Build something they can never tear down again. I love you forever. Mama ***. Colton blinked hard, the words blurring as tears filled his eyes. McAllister. He whispered. No wonder the McAllister land deal mattered so much. No wonder the old families had feared him coming back. He wasn't just a drifter reclaiming stolen land. He was the last living tie between two of the most powerful bloodlines in the region, the true owner of it all. All of Silverstone. All of Willow Creek. All of McAllister Ridge. It was all his by birthright. Colton sat back on his heels, the setting sun painting the world in gold, and for the first time in a long, long time, he smiled. But not a bitter smile. Not the hard smile he wore when facing men like Gregory Miles or women like Marissa Davenport. It was a real smile. A smile of peace. He folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into the bundle. Then he stood, brushed the dirt from his jeans, and turned toward Jackson. "Get me the architects," he said, his voice steady, commanding. "And the historians." Jackson blinked. "Boss?" "We're rebuilding Willow Creek," Colton said. "Not for profit. Not for mansions. Not for power. For the people who remember what this land was really about." He paused, staring out at the hills, already imagining the ranches, the wildflowers, the creeks running free again. "It's time to bring the heart back to Silverstone. For Mama. For my family. For everyone who was forgotten." And with that, Colton West, the man they once laughed at, the drifter they humiliated, walked back to the SUV, carrying not just the deeds to Silverstone, but the spirit of an entire forgotten world on his shoulders. This time, he wasn't just coming back. He was coming home. If you like this story, comment, share and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.